authorize a strike. What that means is that the union's executive committee now has the power to call a strike if they deem necessary. What's also important to acknowledge in that conversation is that prior to calling a strike, the executive committee would have
That strike authorization vote in December was nearly unanimous. Sources indicated the players were aligned, unified, ready to walk away if necessary. But now, fewer players are in alignment than were just 3 months ago. Something changed. And what we're about to uncover reveals a fracture inside the WNBA Players Association that nobody saw coming.
a letter signed by nearly a dozen prominent agents representing players of varying standings in the league, from some of the top players in the league to middle tier players, etc. These are some of the most experienced agents, not only in women's basketball, but in sports, period.
Nearly a dozen of the most experienced agents in women's basketball, representing everyone from top-tier stars to middle-tier players, sent a letter to WNBPA Executive Director Terry Carmichael Jackson on Thursday. The request was simple: give us access to the league's latest proposals so we can properly advise our clients. Think about what that means. The people whose job is to protect these players are essentially saying they're being kept in the dark about the very deals that will define their clients' careers.
Players at unrivaled semifinals games at Barclays in New York City. In addition to learning about this counterproposal sent from the league, which included minimal changes, the players spoke about where they stand on a strike. Notably, Kelsey Plum said that a strike would be bad for the union.
The league's latest counterproposal came back Sunday with minimal changes, and that's when the cracks started showing publicly. Kelsey Plum, a member of the union's executive committee, went on record at the unrivaled semifinals saying a strike would be bad for both the union and the league. Not "we'll do what's necessary," not "we're prepared to fight." Bad for everyone. That's a complete shift in messaging from someone who's supposed to be union leadership.
Whatever was necessary to get a deal done, including striking if necessary. But the language around all of that alluded to an idea or a sense that a strike could be imminent. A strike was something that was more likely than not, based again on the language that was coming out of the union.
The language coming out of the union for weeks had been staunch, uncompromising. Strike if necessary. Do whatever it takes. Sources told reporters there was a belief among union leadership that a strike was something that needed to be pursued, that it was likely, maybe even imminent. But when you have an executive committee member publicly saying the opposite, you've got a problem. Because now the question isn't just about negotiating with the league. It's about whether the union itself is on the same page.
And are in direct kind of misalignment with that messaging. When you have a member of the executive committee saying a strike would be bad for the league and for the union, that forces, the union to address the disconnect, because now you have a player whose tone has changed in regards to the strike, whose tone has changed publicly regarding the strike. So
Breanna Stewart and Kelsey Plum sent a letter directly to Terry Carmichael Jackson, two executive committee members calling out their own leadership for communication issues and mishandling of negotiations. The letter leaked to ESPN, which means someone wanted this public. And regardless of whether these are the only two players who feel this way, you cannot ignore two of the biggest voices in the league directly challenging how their union is being run.
Two of the leading voices, not only in the league, these are two of the leading voices, not only within the union, but within the league at large. And anytime players of that caliber speak, attention must be paid. And their assertion, again, was that they were speaking on behalf of other players who feel the same way and haven't felt comfortable enough to speak up about it.
Here's where we stand, 5 days out from the league's target date of March 10th. The union won't budge on preserving league funding for players. the league seemingly won't give more than 15% of shared revenue. Housing has become a major sticking point. The union wants it for all players in early years, then scaled back for those earning roughly 75% of max salary in later years. The league's pre-weekend proposal offered housing for everyone except rookies in 2026. They're not even in the same neighborhood on the fundamentals.
Head into this week, the union won't budge on a pre-serving league-funded housing for players, and the league similarly won't give the players more than 15% of shared revenue of the pie. As a result, the negotiations will need to get creative prior to this weekend. The proposal the union has requested for housing for all players in the first few years of the
Sports Business Journal is already calling this an artificial deadline. The league told the union on February 23rd that if a deal isn't signed by March 10th, they'd need to reconsider the schedule. But here's what's telling. The union initially balked at that threat because the league had taken 6 weeks to respond to a pre-Christmas request for 30% revenue share. 6 weeks of silence, then suddenly they need an answer in 2 weeks, or the season's in jeopardy? That's pressure tactics, not good faith negotiating. And now we're getting reports that details from both Friday's union proposal and Saturday's league counterproposal are completely undisclosed. Normally when proposals get exchanged in high-profile negotiations like this, details leak. Reporters get information, we know what's on the table, but this time, radio silence. No revenue-sharing specifics, no contract details, nothing. That level of secrecy suggests either both sides are closer than they're letting on, or they're so far apart that releasing details would cause panic.
It's been reported that regarding proposal traded this weekend, details was undisclosed. I have yet to see anything published with new CBA details from WNBA/WNBPA. Could this be a good thing? Now, shout out to Van Shea. Let's dive into
The union voted to authorize a strike back in December. That doesn't mean they announced they will strike. It means the executive committee now has the power to call one if they deem it necessary. But here's the critical detail. Before calling a strike, that executive committee would need to have very lengthy, detailed discussions with its members again. And based on what we're seeing now with Plum and Stewart's public statements, those discussions would not go smoothly. The divide is real. You've got players who were ready to strike 3 months ago potentially having second thoughts. You've got agents demanding transparency. You've got executive committee members contradicting each other in public. You've got leaked letters to ESPN exposing internal conflict. This isn't a unified front walking into the final days before a deadline. This is a fractured union trying to hold together while negotiating the most important deal in WNBA history. So let's talk about what's actually at stake here, because the numbers tell a story that explains why both sides are dug in so deep. The WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth. We're talking about a league that averaged 1.2 million viewers per game in 2024 compared to 462,000 the previous season. That's not incremental growth. That's a seismic shift. Attendance records shattered across the board, merchandise sales through the roof, corporate sponsorships flooding in at levels the league has never seen before. And the players know this. They see the packed arenas. They see their jerseys selling out. They see the media deals getting negotiated. They know the league is sitting on a goldmine of future revenue, and they want their fair share of it locked in now, not 5 years from now when the next CBA comes up. But here's the league's position, and it's not entirely unreasonable from a business standpoint. Yes, growth is happening, but we're not profitable yet. The infrastructure investments are massive. Expansion teams cost money. Charter flights cost money. Better facilities cost money. Marketing costs money. And if we commit to revenue-sharing percentages based on projections that don't materialize, we could cripple the league's ability to sustain this growth. That's the fundamental tension. The players want to capitalize on the momentum right now. The league wants to protect itself against uncertainty while the business model stabilizes, and neither side is willing to blink first. The housing issue is particularly revealing because it's not just about money, it's about respect and quality of life. WNBA players have been dealing with substandard housing situations for years. Shared apartments, questionable neighborhoods, having to find their own accommodations in cities they don't know. It's been a persistent complaint, and now that the league has leverage and attention, the players want it fixed permanently. The league offering housing for everyone except rookies in 2026 is actually a significant concession from where they've been historically. But the union's counter, housing for everyone in early years, then scaled back only for max salary players later, shows they're thinking long-term about protecting the middle and lower-tier players who need it most. And that's where the agent's letter becomes so important. Those middle-tier players, the ones making between $70,000 and $20,000 per year, they're the ones most affected by housing provisions and revenue-sharing structures. If their agents can't see the proposals, can't analyze the fine print, can't advise them on whether to accept or reject a deal, those players are negotiating blind. And that's exactly what that letter was calling out. Now let's address the elephant in the room. What happens if March 10th comes and goes without a deal? The league has implied they'd need to reconsider the schedule, which could mean anything from delaying the season to canceling games to implementing their last best offer and daring the union to strike. None of those options are good for anyone. A delayed season means lost revenue, angry fans, damaged momentum from last year's incredible growth, and potential sponsor complications. Canceled games mean the same problems, magnified. And implementing a last best offer without union agreement? That's basically forcing a strike, which brings us right back to the internal division problem. Because here's what a strike would actually look like in practice. The executive committee would call for it, but would the players actually honor it? Based on Kelsey Plum's public comments and the Stewart Plum letter, you'd have significant players potentially breaking ranks. And a strike only works if it's unified. If star players cross the picket line because they don't think striking is worth it, the whole strategy collapses. The league knows this. They can see the same cracks we're seeing, which means they have less incentive to make major concessions because they're betting the union won't actually follow through on a strike threat when push comes to shove. And that's the position Terry Carmichael Jackson finds herself in right now. She's trying to negotiate the best possible deal for her members while simultaneously managing internal dissent from some of her most prominent players. She's facing agents demanding transparency while trying to maintain negotiating leverage. She's got a ticking clock that may or may not be real, and she's got to figure out whether her membership will actually back her up if she calls for a strike. That's an impossible position, so what's the likely outcome here? Based on everything we're seeing, my read is that a deal gets done, but it's going to be closer to the league's position than the union's initial demands. The internal fractures are too visible. The agents are too concerned. The public statements are too contradictory. The league can smell blood in the water, and they're not going to make major concessions when they don't have to. The players will probably get some version of improved housing, maybe a modest bump in revenue sharing from where it currently stands, some better working conditions and benefits. But that 30% revenue share the union asked for pre-Christmas? Not happening. The preservation of league funding at current levels? Probably gets scaled back. The comprehensive housing for all players indefinitely gets phased out for higher earners sooner than the union wants. And the real tragedy here is that this might have been avoidable. If the union had maintained a unified front, if the communication with agents and members had been clearer, if the executive committee had been on the same page publicly, they'd have so much more leverage right now. Instead, they're negotiating from a position of visible weakness, just as the league is experiencing historic growth. The timing couldn't be worse. This is the moment when the WNBA has the most attention, the most momentum, the most potential for transformative change. And instead of capitalizing on that with a strong unified push for a groundbreaking CBA, we're watching internal drama play out in public while the deadline approaches. What do you think happens on March 10th? Does a deal get done, or are we headed for a work stoppage that could derail the league's momentum? And more importantly, can the union recover from this public fracturing, or have Stewart and Plum's letters permanently damaged the leadership's credibility? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let's see how this plays out over the next 5 days.